Your words be, Mr. Gangling. In what category would you put these hillmen? More animal than men? How much more?
In 1965, Pernell Roberts did something that shocked America. He walked away from television's biggest show at its peak. Bonanza made him rich and famous, but he called it a crusher that sent him to see a doctor for help. What fans didn't know was darker. Behind his cowboy smile was a man breaking down mentally. He turned down millions of dollars and became Hollywood's most hated actor overnight. His co-stars stopped talking to him. Directors refused to hire him. But that wasn't even his biggest tragedy. What happened to his family would haunt him forever. Pernell Elvin Roberts Jr. was born on May 18, 1928 in Waycross, Georgia, a small town where no one expected a boy to grow up and chase fame. His father made his living as a Dr. Pepperroot salesman, while his mother cared for their home. He was their only child, and from a young age, he stood out. At just 9 years old, he built his own puppet theater and put on backyard shows that left the neighbors whispering. He argued with Sunday school teachers, too, which shocked many in the conservative South. People began to notice his curious spirit and outspoken ways. And while some saw promise, others worried he would never fit the mold expected of him. As a teenager in the 1940s, he showed another side of himself. He played the French horn in his high school band, a choice unusual for a boy in rural Georgia. He had a gift for music, but he also loved the stage. In church plays, he often took leading roles, and when the USO shows came through town to entertain troops, he was there singing with a deep baritone voice that caught attention. Quietly, he was filling notebooks with monologues and dreaming of Hollywood. At 15, he told friends he planned to make it there one day, a dream few believed possible for someone from Waycross. After high school in 1945, Roberts entered Georgia Tech, one of the South's best engineering colleges. His parents thought this was the start of a secure future. But the dream didn't last. Within 2 semesters, he had flunked out. He skipped labs, clashed with professors, and seemed to care more about other interests than his classes. In a town where few young men even attended college, his failure quickly became the subject of gossip. His mother was seen crying. His father looked defeated, and neighbors whispered that he had thrown away his chance at a good life. But Roberts didn't see it as the end. He had already decided that a different kind of future was waiting for him. At 18 in May 1946, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Rather than seeing combat, he played tuba and horn in the Marine Corps Band, performing in more than 150 parades and ceremonies over 2 years. The discipline of military life changed him. Later, he said the Marines had taught him discipline, integrity, and a kind of stubbornness that he would carry into his career. He also risked sneaking away during leave to audition in New York, knowing he could be punished if caught. When he left the Marines in 1948 with an honorable discharge, he was tougher, more determined, and ready to chase the stage more seriously. Roberts tried college again, this time at the University of Maryland, but books and classrooms couldn't hold his attention for long. He threw himself into the theater department, taking roles in every play he could. In 1949, he performed in All and also appeared in Antigone, falling in love with classical theater. He rarely sat through lectures, and once again he never finished a degree. Still, while his classmates complained about exams, he searched playhouses in Washington, D.C. for auditions, convinced that academic failure did not have to define him. The years that followed were some of the hardest of his life. From 1946 to 1955, Roberts juggled a long list of jobs just to stay afloat. He worked as a butcher, a forest ranger, a railroad riveter, and even as an apprentice for the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. At times, he held more than one of these tough jobs at once simply to pay the rent. By age 27, he had already flunked out of college more than once, spent 2 years in the Marines, and still hadn't broken into acting the way he hoped. He later admitted that by 1950 all of those struggles taught him something important. That real purpose mattered more to him than financial security. In 1950 he found his way into Washington, D.C.'s Arena Stage Company. Life there was far from glamorous. Audiences could be fewer than a dozen people. The theaters were drafty and the pay barely covered food. He often shared tiny apartments or even slept backstage. He performed in plays like The Adding Machine, The Firebrand, and Faith of Our Fathers, sometimes jumping between 3 productions in a single week. It was exhausting, but Roberts said those underground years built his skill and resilience. Between 1951 and 1953, he finally began to rise with arena stage. He played Petruchio in The Taming of the Shrew and appeared in Twelfth Night, Glass Menagerie, and The Importance of Being Earnest. He performed in more than 200 shows in a year, earning the notice of critics. For the first time, it looked like his persistence might pay off. In 1955, he took his biggest gamble yet. He moved to New York for a Broadway debut in Tonight and Samurant. It was a risk. He had saved every cent he could, knowing that if the play failed, he might have to return to hard labor. The premiere came on February 16, 1955. Reviews were mixed, and after the show, Roberts admitted he considered quitting acting altogether, but the exposure from Samurant opened new doors just when he needed them most. That same year, his luck finally turned. Cast in an off-Broadway production of Macbeth, Roberts delivered a performance so powerful that he won the Drama Desk Vernon Rice Award for Best Actor. It was an extraordinary honor for someone still so new to the professional stage. The success carried him into Romeo and Juliet, where he played Mercutio. Suddenly critics were calling his name, and by 1956 he was being considered for major roles. In May 1956, Pernell Roberts made a bold move in his Broadway career when he stepped onto the stage at the Martin Beck Theater just 3 blocks from Times Square. The play was called The Lovers, and his co-star was a then little-known actress named Joanne Woodward. Within 2 years, she would become a Hollywood legend, winning an Oscar for The Three Faces of Eve. The play opened on May 10, 1956, but shockingly closed after only 4 performances on May 12. Such a short run for a Broadway production was almost unheard of, especially with such talent on stage. Set in 12th century France, Roberts played Ostrich Dilrick, and though the play ended quickly, it caught the eyes of critics and Hollywood scouts. For Woodward, it was a stepping stone to stardom. For Roberts, it was the attention he needed to begin carving out a place in television and film. The following year, in 1957, Roberts returned to the stage in A Clearing in the Woods, this time alongside Kim Stanley, one of the fiercest method actresses of her time. Stanley's approach was so intense that she stayed in character both on and off the stage. Rehearsals were unpredictable, and backstage stories circulated of nightly arguments and creative clashes. Roberts, who had been trained in classical acting, found himself colliding with Stanley's raw, immersive style. Her emotional volatility was legendary, and the tension between them became the subject of whispers among the press and crew. Despite the difficulties, the play strengthened Roberts's image as a serious actor willing to endure conflict in the name of art. That same year, he deepened his reputation by immersing himself in classical theater. At the American Shakespeare Festival, he played Petruchio in The Taming of the Shrew, took roles in Measure for Measure and King John, and starred as Antonio in John Webster's violent tragedy, The Duchess of Maui. Unlike many of his peers, Roberts didn't just dabble in Shakespeare, he embraced it fully. His performances stood out for their strength and depth, and critics praised his versatility. The productions were daring, especially The Duchess of Maui, when nearly every character met a brutal end by the final curtain. This period of mastery in 1957 set him apart in a Hollywood more interested in quick commercial success than in classical artistry. In 1958, Roberts made his first Hollywood film appearance in Desire Under the Elms, an adaptation of Eugene O'Neill's play, starring alongside Sophia Loren and Anthony Perkins. He played Peter Cat, one of the battling sons fighting over family inheritance. The film had been shot in the spring and summer of 1957 and premiered in early 1958. The transition from stage to screen came with a shock. Roberts, used to the immediacy of live theater, now found himself waiting for hours under hot lights, rehearsing for cameras, and receiving little feedback. The isolation and lack of control were difficult for him. Yet, the film gave him a dramatic baptism into Hollywood. Its controversial plot of passion, betrayal, and murder added even more pressure, but it ended up earning an Oscar nomination for Best Cinematography. That same year, Roberts entered Hollywood's most enduring genre with The Sheepman, co-starring Glenn Ford and Shirley MacLaine. The story followed a sheep rancher clashing with cattlemen with Roberts cast as the villain. The film balanced drama with humor and became a box office success. In 1959, he followed with Ride Lonesome, a psychological western with Randolph Scott. Roberts played the outlaw Sam Boone, and the film became iconic for its mature themes and complex characters. Ironically, these successes trapped him in the western mold. Hollywood began to see him almost exclusively as cowboy material, a label he privately resented but couldn't escape. In 1959, Roberts auditioned for a new NBC Western that was being filmed in color, still a rarity in American homes. Fewer than 150,000 households even owned a color television set at the time, out of tens of millions across the country. NBC believed the show could help boost sales of RCA's color TVs, and they poured an astonishing $100,000 into each episode. Roberts was cast alongside Lauren Green, Michael Landon, and Dan Blocker. Though unsure about joining another Western, he was drawn by the ambition of the project and signed a 6-year contract. His character Adam Cartwright was written as the oldest and most educated of the brothers. Roberts shaped him into a thoughtful figure, an architectural engineer with a university degree who served as the voice of reason in the family. He brought his stage training into the role, giving Adam a depth not often seen in television westerns. Scripts often had Adam debating ethics and weighing the costs of violence, a sharp contrast to the more action-driven storylines given to his brothers. Audiences noticed. Surveys from the show's first 2 years revealed that episodes centered on Adam drew higher ratings, especially among women and educated viewers. Critics even called him a thinking man's cowboy. When Bonanza premiered on September 12, 1959, it quickly became a phenomenon. By its second season, the show was ranked in the top 20 with a Nielsen rating of 24.8, which meant nearly 12 million households tuned in every week. By 1961, it was the number 2 show in the country. Roberts was suddenly one of the most recognized faces on television. NBC's New York office received more than 20,000 letters a month addressed to him, and stores sold Adam Cartwright hats for children. The attention, however, was overwhelming. Roberts, a private man, later admitted that fame left him bewildered and longing for the quiet life he had before becoming America's favorite big brother. Behind the scenes, the cast chemistry on screen often masked real tension. At first, Roberts shared dinners and laughs with Green, Landon, and Blocker. But as the years went on, creative disagreements strained those bonds. Roberts was outspoken about script quality and social issues, once protesting the use of white actors to play Native American roles. His blunt honesty clashed with Landon, who was gaining power as a writer and producer on the show. The two men grew resentful of one another, with Roberts criticizing Landon's acting and Landon gossiping about Roberts on talk shows. In 1962, Pernell Roberts was living a secret battle that few Bonanza fans could have imagined. He was playing the eldest Cartwright, a role that made him a household name. But behind the cameras, he was breaking down. The pressure had grown so heavy that he admitted years later, "The thing became a real crusher mentally for me. I even went to a doctor for help." In the early 1960s, it was almost unheard of for a male television star to talk about mental health. But Roberts didn't hide how much he was suffering. He confessed, "I was upset the minute I arrived for work. That's no way to live." Between 1962 and 1964, his condition became so serious that he sought professional help, knowing it could damage his reputation. His honesty revealed how damaging the television machine could be, even for one of its brightest stars. By 1965, Roberts was 37 years old. But Bonanza's script still forced him into the role of an obedient son. He described the experience as 6 seasons of feeling like a damned idiot, going around like a middle-aged teenager, saying, yes, P, no P. At a time when actors almost never criticized a successful series in public, Roberts shocked the press by calling his dialogue downright disgusting. Such dialogue for a grown man. He felt the role was stifling, reducing his work to memorizing lines instead of real acting. His blunt confession opened a window into a larger problem in television: how serious talent was often wasted in repetitive roles that offered no growth or challenge. In 1963, Roberts made his disappointment even clearer. I haven't grown at all since the series began. I have an impotent role. Wherever I turn, there's the father image. Bonanza had already produced more than 200 episodes, yet Adam Cartwright remained the same. Every storyline kept him under his father's shadow, leaving him frustrated and restless. Even though NBC paid him over $10,000 per episode, worth more than $90,000 today, Roberts believed quitting was a bigger victory than staying. He admitted that the lack of growth weighed more heavily on him than the fortune he was giving up. NBC, determined to keep him, locked him into a strict multi-year contract. It paid a record $10,500 per episode, nearly $693,000 for the 1965-66 season, but it also stopped him from taking any outside work. Roberts compared it to being a prisoner with artistic handcuffs. He could not accept film roles or theater projects at a time when he most wanted creative freedom. Hollywood insiders were stunned when he chose to walk away from all that money. But Roberts made it clear that no salary could make up for the loss of his artistic identity. His determination to change things often led to clashes with the show's producers. Roberts pushed for deeper storylines, more realistic dialogue, and even marriage for Adam Cartwright, but his requests were rejected. He sometimes crossed out lines in his scripts or refused to memorize speeches he felt were pointless. Producer David Dtor later admitted that he regretted not listening to Roberts' ideas. Still, his refusal to compromise earned him a reputation as difficult and made Hollywood executives wary of him. In 1965, NBC offered him one of the richest deals in television, $10,500 per episode with full residuals, which would have made him a millionaire many times over. His co-stars signed without hesitation, but Roberts toned it down. Many predicted career suicide. When asked why, he said money alone wasn't worth sacrificing his integrity. The press followed the story closely, amazed that someone would reject such security and fame. His final episode, Dead and Gone, aired on April 4, 1965 and left millions of viewers stunned. Bonanza had been the top-rated show that year with 20 to 25 million Americans watching each week. The storyline carried a heavy sense of loss, and Roberts' absence afterward created a nationwide shock. Newspapers reported floods of protest letters and calls from fans who felt betrayed. Some even organized campaigns demanding his return. Yet, instead of giving Adam a dramatic farewell, the writers simply explained that he had moved away. At times, they said he was in Europe or on the East Coast or in California. The vague explanations left fans unsatisfied, and even his co-star Dan Blocker wished they had given Adam a true ending, saying it would have allowed the family to mourn. After his departure, Roberts told reporters, "I'm just sorry I wasn't able to get out of my contract and leave sooner." That statement angered NBC and other producers, and though no official blacklist was announced, his career suffered, roles quickly dried up, and his days as a television headliner seemed over. For years, Hollywood treated him as a risk, fearing his refusal to play along with the studio system. From 1965 through the late 1970s, Roberts lived under the shadow of Adam Cartwright. Casting agents continued to see him as the Bonanza son, offering him roles that felt like copies of the character he had left behind. He once admitted, "I was being offered jobs, but they were all parts like Adam Cartwright." During that time, he turned down contracts worth millions, one worth $3 million in the mid-1960s, equal to at least $25 million today, because he didn't want to repeat the same role. But the sacrifice left him with fewer opportunities, and he often returned to stage work where the pay was modest. But the performances gave him meaning. He tried to reinvent himself through foreign films. In 1969, he starred in Four Road Out, filmed in Spain, and the next year in Tibetana, an adventure comedy that critics later called confusing and poorly written. Neither film was successful, and by 1972, his attempt at international stardom had collapsed. Some prints of Tibetana circulated only in low-quality copies sold at European flea markets. Instead of breaking away from his television image, these films pushed him further into obscurity. Roberts' personal life carried as much weight as his career struggles. At 23 in 1951, he married Vera Mowry, a theater professor. Their son Jonathan Christopher was born the same year. Roberts' pursuit of Broadway roles, however, pulled him away from his family. By 1953, They were already living apart, and the marriage ended in 1959, just before his Bonanza fame. Decades later, tragedy struck when Jonathan died in a motorcycle accident at the age of 38 in 1989. Roberts never fully recovered from the loss. In 1962, he married again, this time to Judith Anna Lee. Their marriage was quiet with little attention from the press, but the strain of his career difficulties took its toll, and they divorced in 1971. The pattern repeated in 1972 when he wed Karanak. This marriage lasted more than 2 decades, bringing stability even as Hollywood largely turned away from him. Carrara supported him through years of smaller theater productions and TV appearances, and together they faced the deep sorrow of losing Jonathan. In 1965, Pernell Roberts made a choice that could have cost him everything. He joined the Selma to Montgomery marches for voting rights. Walking shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King Jr., Harry Belafonte, Joan Baez, and Dick Gregory. The march covered 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, through violent threats from segregationists and the hostility of the state government. On March 7, 1965, a day that became known as Bloody Sunday, more than 600 peaceful marchers were brutally attacked by state troopers. Roberts, though already a television star, faced the same dangers as every other marcher: threats, harassment, and the very real risk of being blacklisted from Hollywood. His decision to show up in person gave the march more national attention and moral support. He was not speaking about civil rights from the safety of a studio. He was risking his career and his safety. Only months later, the Voting Rights Act was passed, a victory that proved how powerful courage and visibility could be in such a dangerous struggle. That same courage carried over into his battles with NBC. During his time on Bonanza, Roberts became furious with the way white actors were being cast in Native American and Asian roles, painted in offensive makeup to pass as characters they were not. It was a practice widely known as yellowface and redface. Roberts refused to stay quiet. He demanded the network begin hiring real Native American and Asian actors for those parts. He even pitched a storyline where his character would marry a Native American woman played by a black actress. NBC rejected the idea outright. Standing up so publicly came with a cost. Roberts made enemies at the network and among conservative producers, and he put his own lead role at risk when his career was at its peak. But his fight forced the industry to take a harder look at how it treated diversity, even if real change came slowly and at Roberts' personal expense. In 1968, after the Fair Housing Act was passed, Roberts again showed that he was not content with giving speeches or lending his name. He appeared before the California Assembly to testify in favor of strong laws that would end housing discrimination. He joined picket lines and risked police violence and arrest while walking through neighborhoods where racial tensions were high. His testimony was blunt and deeply personal. He told lawmakers that words were not enough. The real test of character, he said, was the choices a person made and the risks they were willing to take in public. His involvement proved to Hollywood that celebrity activism could mean more than photo opportunities. For Roberts, it meant being out on the front lines. All of this came at a steep price. At the height of his career, NBC offered him $10,500 per episode of Bonanza, an amount worth nearly $100,000 in today's money. He turned it down and walked away. Hollywood labeled him difficult and unreliable, and casting directors stopped calling. Lead roles that should have been his never came. While his co-stars built fortunes and influence, Roberts became a pariah in an industry that valued silence and compliance. Still, many admired him for risking his career in the name of his beliefs. His sacrifice showed later generations of actors and activists that real integrity often demanded real hardship. For more than a decade after leaving Bonanza in 1965, Roberts found himself largely shut out of television. He admitted openly in 1979 that he hadn't been faced with offers because the opportunity simply never arose. That same year, however, he was cast in Trapper John, M.D., playing Dr. Trapper John McIntyre. The role gave him a second chance at stardom after 14 long years without a lead role. He was 51 years old, an age when most actors were fading from television, but this time he found redemption. The series allowed him to reinvent himself, and the timing could not have been more important. The gamble paid off. In 1981, Roberts was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series, his first such recognition since the height of Bonanza. At the 33rd Emmy Awards, he stood alongside Larry Hagman from Dallas, Daniel J. Travanti from Hill Street Blues, Edward Asner from Lou Grant, and Louis Gossett Jr. from Palmerstown. Although he didn't win, the nomination itself was vindication after years of rejection. It proved that talent and persistence could triumph over years of being dismissed. Trapper John, M.D., went on to run for 7 successful seasons from September 23, 1979 until September 4, 1986. Roberts starred in 151 episodes, more than doubling the time the original Trapper John character had been on MASH. Critics credited the success of the series to the depth and warmth Roberts brought to the role. The show mixed medical mysteries and ethical dilemmas with his steady presence as chief surgeon at San Francisco Memorial Hospital. For Roberts, it was the chance to move beyond his image as Adam Cartwright and connect with a new generation of viewers. But his personal life was struck by tragedy in 1989 when his only child, Jonathan Christopher, died in a motorcycle accident at just 37 years old. Jonathan had been born in October 1951 and was deeply close to his father despite Roberts' demanding career. The accident devastated him. Roberts never spoke publicly about it, keeping his grief private. Friends later said the loss shattered his sense of purpose and remained the darkest chapter of his life. The details of the accident were never widely shared, adding to the silence Roberts chose to maintain as he carried his grief. In the early 1990s, Roberts gave television one last contribution as the narrator of FBI, The Untold Stories, which ran from September 1991 to June 1993. The show dramatized real FBI cases using actual news footage and surveillance alongside reenactments. Roberts' voice provided the steady guidance the series needed. It became his final major role, and when the show ended after 2 seasons, he quietly stepped out of the public eye. Roberts found love again in 1997 when he married Dr. Eleanor Criswell, a respected psychologist and academic. Their friendship grew into love after the loss of her first husband in a road accident. They had no children together, but their marriage gave Roberts peace and support in his later years. Eleanor stood by him through his declining health, becoming his greatest source of strength. In 2007, Roberts was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at the age of 79. Even then, he fought the disease with determination for nearly 3 years. Though survival rates for the illness were grim, only about 10% of patients lived more than 5 years after diagnosis, and the odds were even worse then. With Eleanor by his side, he endured painful treatments and continued to face life with dignity until January 24, 2010, when he died at 81. By the time of his passing, Roberts carried the weight of being the last surviving Cartwright from Bonanza. Dan Blocker had died in 1972, Lauren Green in 1987, and Michael Landon in 1991. He sometimes jokingly introduced himself as Pernell, the last one, Roberts. But the truth was filled with sorrow. Being the final living link to one of television's most beloved families brought more loneliness than pride. When he died in his Malibu home, Eleanor was at his side, making sure his final moments were peaceful. The news of his death spread quickly, reminding the world of an actor who had walked away from fame on his own terms and paid the price for integrity. With him, television lost not only the last Cartwright, but a man whose life story was as powerful as any role he ever played.